You wake up, no alarm, no notification, just your body deciding on its own that it's done sleeping. You sit up, you stretch, and the only question in your head is the only question that's ever mattered to a human being on a morning like this. What do I feel like doing today? For almost the entire span of human existence, that wasn't a fantasy. That was Tuesday. Here's the number that quietly changed what it means to be human. The average person alive today will spend something like 90,000 hours of their life working. That's not a typo. 90,000 hours handed over to a job, a schedule, a boss, a calendar that someone else built and you just live inside of. Everything you're about to hear sounds impossible until you realize it's exactly how humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Not because ancient humans were lazy, because that's roughly how long it actually takes to feed yourself when you're not also feeding shareholders. In 1963, an anthropologist tracked the daily routines of a hunting and gathering community in the Kalahari, recording exactly how their time got spent across an ordinary week. The number that came back stunned him. Around 2.5 days of actual labor. The rest of the week was theirs. And this wasn't a one-off. Researchers ran the same kind of tracking on hunter-gatherer groups in Tanzania, in Paraguay, in Australia, different continents, different climates, different diets, zero contact with each other. Same answer every time. 15 to 20 hours a week on the work of staying alive. You probably work double that. Easily. Now somebody's going to say, fine, but those are modern people living a traditional lifestyle, not actual ancient humans. Fair pushback. So let's go to the part of this story that doesn't rely on observing living people at all. Let's go to the bones. When you put a hunter-gatherer skeleton next to the skeleton of an early farmer who lived just a few thousand years later, the difference isn't subtle. The farmer is shorter. The farmer's bones show signs of going hungry on a regular basis. The farmer's spine has the kind of wear you'd expect from decades of repetitive, grinding labor. The farmer's teeth are a disaster, riddled with cavities from a diet built almost entirely around grain. The hunter-gatherer skeleton tells a completely different story. Taller, stronger, straighter teeth, joints that held up. Whatever these people were doing with their bodies all day, it was not what we picture when we imagine prehistoric survival as one long, grinding emergency. But then, archaeologists found something that bones could never explain. It was art. In 1994, explorers crawled into a cave system in southern France and found paintings on the walls that were roughly 30,000 years old. And these weren't crude scratches, horses rendered with shading and motion, lions captured mid-stride. Someone with real skill had spent hours, maybe days, working by firelight, painting animals onto stone for no reason a survival textbook could explain. Not for food, not for defense, because they wanted to make something beautiful, and they had the hours to do it in. Go further back and it gets stranger. In a cave in South Africa, researchers found tiny seashells with deliberate holes drilled through them, dated to roughly 100,000 years old. Beads, jewelry. The nearest coastline was over 20 kilometers away, which means somebody walked there, collected the shells, walked back, and then sat down with a stone tool to painstakingly drill a hole through each one. That's not a 5-minute task. That's a project. Undertaken purely so, something would look good around someone's neck. And then there's the flute, a 40,000-year-old instrument carved from a vulture bone found in Germany, with 5 finger holes spaced with real precision. Whoever made it understood pitch, understood sound, and devoted real time to crafting something whose entire purpose was music. None of these are isolated discoveries. Decorative carving, elaborately worked tools, ornamental objects that serve no practical function whatsoever. They show up across Europe, Africa, and Asia, going back over 100,000 years. This is what people did with the hours they weren't spending on survival. They made things. They made things beautiful for absolutely no functional reason at all. So, picture an actual day. You wake up around dawn. The coals from last night's fire are still warm. Someone feeds it back to life. You eat whatever's left from yesterday. Meat, maybe some nuts, maybe fruit. Somebody gathered the day before. Breakfast is loud. People talk. Nobody's rushing anywhere. Sometime in the late morning, a small group might head out to hunt or forage. But here's the part that breaks the modern assumption completely. You don't go every single day. If the hunt 2 days ago went well and there's still food, you might not leave camp at all. Instead, you might spend the morning fixing a spear, weaving something, working a hide until it's soft enough to use. Nobody's clocking you in. Nobody's standing over your shoulder. You're doing it because doing things well matters to you. Because being good at something earns you standing in a group where standing is everything. When a hunt does happen, it's not the sprinting chase from a nature documentary. Humans are persistence hunters. We jog. We track an animal for hours at a steady pace until heat exhaustion does the work for us. Because almost nothing else on the savannah can sweat the way we can. The whole thing might run 3 to 6 hours, including the walk there and back. The animal gets carried home, everyone eats, and by early afternoon, the part of the day that looks anything like work is basically finished. What comes after is the part modern people genuinely struggle to picture: nothing, and also everything. People sit in the shade, they talk, they pick through each other's hair, not for hygiene, but because physical touch builds trust the same way conversation does. They make bead, they carve marks into bone just because. They nap. One researcher who spent extended time among a hunter-gatherer community clocked roughly 6 hours a day of what he called social time. Not labor, not sleep, just being present with other people, laughing, arguing, telling each other things. In a world with no money, no police, no written contract, your survival is your relationship. If people don't like you, they don't have to share with you when you're starving. So you invest enormous time into those bonds, not because it's efficient, but because it's the actual infrastructure your life runs on. Then the sun goes down, and something interesting happened. Researchers who recorded hundreds of hours of conversation among a hunter-gatherer group found that during daylight, talk stayed practical, where the animal tracks were, which plants were ready, somebody not pulling their weight. But at night, around the fire, the numbers flipped. The overwhelming majority of nighttime conversation turned into stories, myths about how the world began, tales of ancestors who did impossible things, jokes, adventures from somewhere far away. This, researchers argue, is where human culture was actually born. Gods, the past, the future, every idea that only shows up once your stomach is full, and the predators are kept back by firelight. And sleep wasn't one long unbroken block the way it is for you. Historical records and sleep research both point to the same pattern before artificial light existed. Roughly 4 hours of sleep, a stretch of quiet wakefulness in the dark, then another 4 hours. So, add it up. 4 to 6 hours a day on food or tools. Around 6 hours of pure social time. 8 hours of sleep split into 2 phases. And then the rest sitting, watching the sky, existing without needing to justify it with output. Then, about 10,000 years ago, something changed everything. People in the Fertile Crescent started planting seeds on purpose. Nobody planned it, nobody voted for it. But almost every human alive today is still living with the consequence. Farming lets you feed more people. More people means you need more food. More food means more farming. Within a handful of generations, the population had grown past the point where you could just walk away and go back to hunting and gathering. There were too many mouths now. You were locked in, and farming demanded far more labor than the lifestyle it replaced. Plowing, weeding, harvesting, storing, defending the harvest from animals and raiders alike. The skeletons confirm it without ambiguity. Early farmers worked harder, ate worse, and died younger than the hunter-gatherers before them. But the population kept climbing anyway, and bigger populations meant specialists, toolmakers, then soldiers, then administrators, and eventually the concept that didn't exist for 300,000 years finally arrived: a job. The idea that your hours belonged to someone else in exchange for the right to keep living. By the time cities existed, the old rhythm was gone, replaced with schedules and obligations, and the quiet assumption that most of your waking life should be spent earning the right to exist in the system that built the schedule in the first place. You'll spend 90,000 hours working. They spent a fraction of that. You sleep in one unbroken block and call it insomnia when you wake at 2 a.m. They slept in 2 phases and used the dark hours in between for nothing in particular, which turned out to be something. The human body you're carrying today isn't outdated. It's perfectly designed for a world that no longer exists. And maybe that's why modern life feels so strangely unnatural, even when everything seems normal.